I stood barefoot in the cramped kitchen of my rented apartment in Riverside Heights, a place that felt less like home and more like a holding cell. At 35, I'd lost count of how many days had blended together since I'd first arrived. Half-finished takeout containers littered the counter. The remains of late nights and early mornings fueled by cheap coffee and the kind of desperation that tastes bitter on the tongue. My blouse, draped over the back of a mismatched chair, smelled faintly of last night's stress sweat and the microwave-reheated coffee I'd abandoned hours ago. Everywhere I looked, reminders of my failures lined the walls, sticky notes with half-baked ideas. Code scribbled on crumpled receipts. A whiteboard covered in smudges from hands too anxious to let the ink dry. My dog, Rocky, a mutt with one ear that never quite stood up straight, sat by the fridge, tail wagging expectantly, oblivious to the tension gnawing at my gut. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a meeting invite that glared back at me like an indictment. Q2 Strategic Integration Review. Apex Core Boardroom. My heart sank. I hadn't expected them to remember my name, let alone request my presence. Not after the way they'd treated me before, like a disposable vendor. A faceless coder they could ghost the moment they squeezed the last drop of creativity from me. Rocky's head tilted, his curious eyes reflecting the uncertainty that had become my constant companion. Did Apex Core even know the software keeping their empire afloat had been built by me during nights of panic attacks and stale instant noodles? Probably not. They saw me as a piece of machinery, something they could plug in and discard without consequence. But what they didn't know, what they'd never expected, was that I'd spent every sleepless night preparing for this moment. That I'd gathered every scrap of proof, every line of stolen code, every single receipt that would force them to see me, not as a tool, but as the architect of their salvation or their destruction. I arrived at the Apex Core boardroom 15 minutes early. The sterile corridor outside humming with the same artificial calm that always set my teeth on edge. The place reeked of polished marble and quiet intimidation. Every step I took echoed off glass walls that seemed designed to amplify the silence, and my doubts. Rocky wasn't with me this time. I'd left him at home with a peanut butter treat and a promise I wasn't sure I'd be able to keep. My phone was still in my pocket, buzzing with notifications I couldn't bring myself to read. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew was coming. When I pushed open the double glass doors, a hush fell over the room. 8 chairs turned in unison, each one occupied by someone whose salary outstripped mine by more zeros than I cared to count. At the head of the table sat Nathaniel Cross, Apex Core's Golden Boy CEO, hair slicked back, watch gleaming, smile so white it practically reflected the conference lights. He didn't even bother to hide his surprise when he saw me walk in. For a moment, his mask cracked, not enough to break, but enough to show the cracks I'd been waiting for. "Karen, didn't expect to see you here so soon," he drawled, as though I'd interrupted his brunch plans. "Didn't expect to be invited." I shot back, keeping my tone neutral. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a prisoner demanding release. But I didn't let it show. He gestured for me to sit. I slid my laptop onto the polished table and clicked it open. Watching the Apex Core logo reflect off the screen like some corporate brand of hubris. "Let's get this over with," Nathaniel said, leaning back in his chair. His confidence was a performance. I could tell. The man had built an empire on boardroom posturing. But his eyes darted to my laptop like he was waiting for a bomb to go off. I didn't make him wait long. "Before we begin," I said, voice steady, "I'd like to show you something." I clicked the first slide. A simple flowchart of Apex Core's prized data system, labeled with their signature branding and the lines of code I knew better than my own heartbeat. A murmur rippled around the table, and Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "What's this?" he asked, the faux patience in his voice thinning like cheap coffee. "That," I said, my voice steady, "is the core architecture of your flagship product, Flux Bridge." I let the silence hang, tasting its sweetness. "Or at least, that's what you call it." He shifted in his seat. "What's your point?" I clicked to the next slide, a screenshot of the Slack conversation they thought they'd buried. Nathaniel's name sat there like a brand, time-stamped and undeniable, just tweak enough to bury the code signature. "No one will know." He'd typed, his arrogance immortalized in pixels. The room went still. The CFO coughed. The CTO's pen clattered to the floor. But I didn't break eye contact with Nathaniel. My point, I continued, leaning forward, is that Flux Bridge isn't yours. It's mine. Every line of code, every module, even the bugs you never bothered to fix. His mouth opened, then shut, like a fish gasping for air. I clicked again. Slide 3. A side-by-side comparison of my original code next to ApexCore's implementation. Right down to the same typo in the error handler. A mistake I'd been too exhausted to catch at 3 a.m. on the night I'd built it. You thought you could steal my work and no one would notice? I asked, voice rising. You thought you could hide it behind boardroom doors and fancy marketing? Nathaniel's face paled. This is a misunderstanding, he stammered. Our team. I cut him off with a single raised hand. Don't insult me with that. You knew exactly what you were doing. He tried to regain composure. But his voice shook. Look, Karen, maybe we can. Maybe we can what? I spat. Sweep it under the rug? Pretend you didn't gut my code and pass it off as yours? This wasn't a misunderstanding, Nathaniel. This was theft. One of the board members. A woman with an expensive-looking scarf and eyes that missed nothing. Leaned forward. Karen, you're making serious accusations. Serious? I laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. No, ma'am, I'm making serious statements. The code is mine. The patents are mine. And the payments you've been making to a shell company? Also mine. The room collectively inhaled. Nathaniel's face crumpled. What payments? He croaked. I clicked slide 4. A spreadsheet of ApexCore's licensing payments routed through shell entities that ultimately led back to me. You've been paying me to use the software you stole, I said, voice low and calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you've already won. The CTO's hand flew to his forehead. My God, he muttered. Nathaniel looked like he'd aged a decade in the last 5 minutes. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I clicked the last slide, slide 5. My patent certificate, with my name, date, and signature shining on the screen like a bullet fired straight through his carefully curated illusion. This is your turning point, Nathaniel, I said. Either you sign a new licensing agreement at 4 times the current rate, with mandatory oversight by my team, or your investors find out that the entire backbone of your business is stolen property. The silence was deafening. I could see it on their faces, the realization that they'd underestimated me. That the girl they'd mocked and discarded was the one holding the grenade they'd thought was defused. Nathaniel swallowed hard, his hands trembling. You wouldn't, he whispered, but even he didn't believe it. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that I'd been saving for this moment. Oh, but I would. And you know what, Nathaniel? I'd sleep like a baby. I leaned back, letting the moment settle over the room like a thundercloud ready to burst. They'd thought I was just another vendor. Just another code monkey. But today, I was the reckoning they never saw coming. And I wasn't going anywhere. I had just finished laying out my terms, my voice steady. My eyes unwavering, when the room fell silent again, thick with tension that clung to the air like smoke after a house fire. Nathaniel's face had gone ashen, his carefully constructed confidence crumbling at the edges like wet paper. I watched him, relishing the small tremor in his hand as he reached for a glass of water he didn't really want. Karen, he began, voice hoarse. Surely there's... Before he could finish, the door behind me burst open with a force that made everyone jump. A young man in a rumpled suit, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed like he'd just run a marathon, stumbled inside clutching a tablet. His badge said, intern. But his eyes screamed panic. Sir, he gasped, eyes wide. It's out there. Already. My pulse quickened. What's out there? I demanded, spinning in my chair to face him. He swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and Nathaniel. The story. The leak. Someone leaked the whole thing. Code. Slack messages. Payments. Everything. It's on TechScoop and half a dozen other sites. It's trending. A hush fell across the boardroom. I felt my stomach drop. Cold and heavy. I hadn't planned for this. Not yet. The leak was supposed to be my ace in the hole. My leverage. But now it was out there. Raw and untamed. And I'd lost control of the narrative. Nathaniel's eyes widened, a flicker of relief flashing across his face like a dying ember. "So now it's a public mess," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now it's out of your hands too." Karen. My mind raced. I hadn't counted on someone else's agenda. Had one of his cronies jumped the gun? Or had someone on my own team cracked under the pressure? I clenched my fists, anger bubbling beneath my skin like boiling oil. "Show me," I snapped at the intern. He nearly dropped the tablet as he handed it over. Fingers trembling, I opened the browser, and there it was. A headline screaming across the screen. Apex Core exposed. CEO Nathaniel Cross implicated in software piracy scandal. Underneath, screenshots of the stolen code, Slack conversations, even the invoices, everything I'd planned to reveal, except it was out of order. Sensationalized, twisted by clickbait headlines that blurred the lines between fact and speculation. My heart pounded. My victory, so carefully orchestrated, had been hijacked by a rogue insider or an overeager journalist. My power to control the narrative was slipping through my fingers like sand. Nathaniel leaned back, the hint of a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Congratulations," he sneered. "You wanted to expose us? Now it's a feeding frenzy. Lawyers are going to crawl all over this like vultures." He thought he'd found an escape route. He thought the chaos would save him. But he didn't understand that this wasn't chaos for me. It was just another variable to manage. I took a deep breath, forcing my racing mind to slow. "Don't look so smug," I said coldly. "This doesn't absolve you of anything. You stole from me, you tried to bury me. And now the entire world knows it." Nathaniel's smirk faltered. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a silver-haired man who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. "Karen," he said, voice measured, "how do you intend to contain this? Investors are already panicking. We've received calls from regulators, journalists, even the FBI." I blinked. The FBI? I hadn't considered that angle. My stomach lurched. This was bigger than I'd imagined. If federal authorities got involved, I'd need every shred of evidence to prove my claims, and my ownership. I straightened my spine, feeling the weight of the room pressing down on me like a vice. "I intend," I said carefully, "to do exactly what I came here to do: enforce my rights. Apex Core is using software I own. You've been paying me under a licensing agreement. But that agreement is about to change. If you want to survive this, you'll sign the new deal, today." Nathaniel's eyes darted to the board members. "We can't sign anything in the middle of an investigation," he snapped. "Our legal team, your legal team," I cut in, my voice hard, "has been complicit in burying this for years. Don't pretend otherwise." The silver-haired board member cleared his throat. "Karen, be reasonable," he said. "We're in a crisis now. If this goes to court." "If it goes to court," I said, leaning forward, "I'll bring every document, every timestamped conversation, every invoice that proves my ownership. And when the dust settles, Apex Core will be nothing but a cautionary tale for every tech company that thinks it can steal from the people who build their empires." A hush fell again. I could see Nathaniel's confidence shattering like glass under a hammer. The intern's tablet buzzed. He glanced at it and paled. "Ma'am," he whispered, there's a live feed outside. Reporters. Cameras. They're waiting for a statement." I felt a wave of adrenaline crash through me. I'd wanted control. Now the world was watching, and I had a choice to make. Stay in this boardroom and fight on their terms. Or step outside and tell my story before they could twist it any further. Nathaniel's lips curled into a sneer. "Well, Karen," he said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Looks like you've lost control. Maybe you'll finally learn what it's like to have your work taken from you." I stood so fast my chair nearly toppled. "You think I'm scared of them?" I snapped, my voice trembling with anger and something deeper, resolve. I'm not scared of you. Or your board, or your PR machine." The silver-haired board member looked at me, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Then go," he said quietly. "Tell your story. We'll have to deal with the fallout one way or another." I squared my shoulders, my pulse hammering like a war drum. "Don't worry," I said, "I'll deal with the fallout, and you'll deal with the consequences." As I turned to leave, I caught Nathaniel's face, twisted with fury and fear. And I realized something. He'd spent his whole life building walls to keep people like me out. But now those walls were crumbling, and he didn't know how to handle it. I pushed open the boardroom door. The noise of the hallway flooding in. The cameras were waiting, lights blazing like a battlefield. And in that moment, I knew the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. As the boardroom door slammed behind me, the world outside felt like it was spinning too fast. The hallway was lined with anxious employees, most of them avoiding eye contact like I'd become radioactive. Their hushed whispers stung like needles against my skin. But I refused to let it slow me down. I felt every step in my bones. Every inch of ground I'd earned with sweat and sleepless nights. The lobby was a war zone of camera flashes and overlapping questions. Reporters in suits and dresses shoved microphones in my face, each one desperate to get the exclusive. I blinked against the barrage of lights, my pulse hammering so hard I thought I'd collapse. Karen, can you confirm that Apex Core stole your code? Karen, what's your next move? Lawsuit? Buyout? Karen, do you have any regrets? I stood there, the noise crashing like a storm around me. And for a second, I felt like that girl again, the one who'd once begged Nathaniel for a chance to prove herself. Only to have him laugh and call my software a garage project. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who'd survived every insult and every stolen line of code. I raised a hand, silencing them. The reporters hushed so fast I could hear the echo of my own heartbeat. I let the moment stretch, savoring the power that came from knowing they were all waiting for me, to speak. Look, I began, my voice clear but trembling just enough to sound human. What's happening here isn't just about code. It's about power, about a company that thought it could build an empire on the backs of people like me and never get caught. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I could see the headline forming in their eyes. Underdog developer takes on tech giant. When I built that software, I continued, I did it in the dark. I did it during the hardest nights of my life, when I didn't know if I'd even have a roof over my head the next month. But I believed in that code. I believed in what it could do. And when Apex Core took it from me, they didn't just steal my work. They stole my story, my sweat, my tears. They tried to erase me. I paused, scanning the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some skeptical, all hungry for the next soundbite. But I'm not here to be erased, I said, my voice steel now. I'm here to remind them, and everyone watching, that you can't bury the people who build your future. I'm not the victim in this story. I'm the author, and I'm not leaving until every line of code they stole is accounted for. A hush fell, so complete I could hear the squeak of a camera lens focusing. A young reporter with a trembling notepad stepped forward, voice shaking. Karen, what do you say to people who think you're just trying to cash in on Apex Core's success? I felt a fire ignite in my chest. Let me be clear, I said, eyes hard. I don't want their money. I want the truth. I want the world to know that every product they've bragged about in boardrooms and press releases was built on stolen dreams, and that every time they cashed a check, it was written with my name. A woman in a red dress at the back raised her voice, cutting through the silence. Do you think Apex Core can survive this scandal? I took a slow breath. That's not my decision, I said, letting the weight of the moment settle. But if they want to survive, they're going to have to face the same reality I faced when they laughed me out of their offices. That you can't build a future on lies. Not anymore. The cameras clicked like gunfire. I felt every flash, every question, every desperate angle. But as I stood there, something shifted. I wasn't hiding behind slides or contracts anymore. I was here, raw and exposed, but powerful in a way I'd never felt before. I could feel the old Karen, the one who would have run from the spotlight, dying right there in front of them, leaving behind the woman who refused to be silent anymore. One of the reporters stepped closer, eyes wide. Karen, what happens next? I smiled, slow and confident, letting the hush hang just a second longer than necessary. What happens next, I said, is that every company that thinks they can get away with stealing from the people who build their empires will think twice. I'm not just here for me. I'm here for every developer who's ever had their work stolen, every coder who's ever been laughed at, every engineer who's ever been told they're replaceable. A wave of applause broke out, hesitant at first but growing louder, until it echoed through the lobby like a victory cry. I felt tears prick my eyes. But I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for tears. This was the time to stand tall. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nathaniel appear at the far end of the lobby, flanked by his legal team, his face pale and drawn. For a moment, our eyes locked across the chaos. He looked like a man who'd lost a kingdom he didn't even know was on fire. I didn't break his gaze. I wanted him to see that he'd lost, that the game was over, that he'd bet everything on me being too small to fight back. And now he was the one who looked small, shrinking under the weight of cameras and questions he couldn't answer. I turned back to the reporters. "This is just the beginning," I said, my voice carrying like a promise. "ApexCore's story isn't over yet. But this time, I'm the one writing it." The cameras flared one last time, capturing every angle, every defiant line of my face. And I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving, I was winning. And I was ready for whatever came next. I didn't have time to process the flood of questions or the echoes of applause as I stepped out of the lobby. My phone buzzed in my pocket like a live wire. Each notification a reminder that the story had already taken on a life of its own. Every outlet in the city wanted a statement. Every developer on social media was tagging me. And every rival CEO was scrambling to figure out how to respond. As I walked down the steps of the Apex Core building, the cold air bit at my cheeks. Sharp and bracing, I paused at the sidewalk, taking a long breath. For the first time in what felt like forever, the world seemed different. The fear that had always lurked behind my ribs felt smaller now, like I'd finally exhaled after years of holding my breath. That's when my phone rang, an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something inside me said to answer. "Karen," a woman's voice said, strong and confident. "This is Isabella Pierce, CEO of Aurora Systems." Aurora Systems. The name alone carried weight. One of the few companies that had never caved to ApexCore's aggressive buyouts. I'd heard the stories of how they'd held their own against ApexCore's legal team. Some even called them rebels. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I wasn't expecting your call." She laughed, a low, warm sound that felt genuine. "You think I'd let a moment like that pass without making a move? I saw your press conference. Impressive. You've got guts, and more importantly, you've got proof." I shifted my weight, heart thudding. "Thanks, I guess, but what do you want from me?" Her tone sharpened. "I want to talk partnership. ApexCore's in freefall. Their investors are panicking. Their shareholders are desperate for reassurance. But you," she paused, "you hold the keys to the kingdom. You own the code they need to stay alive. And you've got something they'll never have, public trust." Public trust. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I'd never spoken before. "I don't know," I began, but she cut me off. "Look, Karen, I'm not here to tell you what to do. But I'm here to tell you there's a window. A chance to do something bigger than just making Apex Core pay. A chance to build something that actually matters." I frowned. "Like what?" "Like a tech alliance," she said, "an ecosystem built on integrity, where the engineers and coders who actually build the products have a stake in them. Where we reward the people who make the magic happen instead of the suits who take the credit." I felt something stir in my chest, a spark I hadn't felt since the first time I realized what my code could do. "You're serious," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "As a heart attack," Isabella replied. "You've got momentum now, Karen. People are listening to you. They're looking for someone to follow. If you want to build something, Aurora Systems wants to be your first partner. We've got the infrastructure, the engineers, the funding, and most importantly, the same enemy." A slow smile spread across my face, one I couldn't hold back. For years, I'd felt like an outsider. Now the idea of building something with people who actually valued what I brought to the table, it was intoxicating. "Okay," I said, "let's talk." She didn't miss a beat. "I'll have my team draft a proposal." "And Karen?" "Yeah? Don't let them bury you again," she said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "You've got them on the ropes. Now finish the fight." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, my mind a whirlwind of possibility. Another call buzzed through. This time it was a text from Ethan. One of the few coders from my old team who'd stuck by me even when I was persona non grata in the tech world. Ethan. Holy hell. Karen. That was incredible. I'm behind you 100%. Let's build something they can't tear down. Tears pricked at my eyes. I'd fought so long to be heard. To be seen. To matter. Now, people were reaching out to me. Wanting to stand beside me instead of pushing me down. I texted back. Thanks. Ethan, I think it's time we show them what we can really do. Another ping. This time an email from a venture capital firm. Subject line. Karen, let's talk funding. The dam had broken. I turned and looked back at the Apex Core Tower. Its glass walls gleaming like a castle under siege. I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The building might have been tall, but it was built on stolen dreams and shaky ground. My dreams were mine. My code was mine. A plan began to form in my mind. A vision of a platform where developers owned their work. Where creativity was rewarded. Where the code that powered the world couldn't be stolen behind closed doors. I started walking, my steps sure and strong. Rocky was waiting for me at home. Tail wagging and eyes bright. When I opened the door, he barked like he'd been waiting a lifetime. I knelt and hugged him, feeling his warmth steady my nerves. Good boy, I whispered into his fur. We're going to build something amazing. Rocky, something they can't ever take away. I stood up, my resolve hardening like forged steel. Apex Core had underestimated me once. The whole industry had, but now they'd see. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about transformation, about reclaiming every late night, every piece of code, every part of myself I'd given away. And this time, I was going to write the story on my own terms. The days that followed felt like a blur of movement and adrenaline. A whirlwind of calls, meetings, and interviews that forced me to shed the last layers of doubt. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose that felt foreign but invigorating. My tiny apartment, once just a stopgap between failures, became the war room of something bigger. Boxes of old hard drives and scribbled notes cluttered the space alongside laptops stacked like precarious towers. Rocky was my only constant, a warm, tail-wagging reminder that I was still human in the middle of this corporate maelstrom. Aurora Systems' proposal came in like a bullet train. Isabella didn't waste time. Her team's contract wasn't just fair, it was empowering. A profit-sharing model, technical ownership, a seat at the table. It was the first time I'd felt like more than a cog in someone else's machine. Ethan came over that night, arms full of takeout containers and an old duffel bag filled with notes, scribbles, and a few of our earliest prototypes. He looked at me, his face flushed with excitement and something deeper, loyalty. You know, Karen, he said, dropping the bag on my kitchen table. I always knew you'd make it big, but I didn't think you'd be the one to bring them to their knees. I smiled, a real one this time. The kind that made my cheeks ache. You always gave me too much credit. I teased. He shook his head. No, Karen, you just didn't give yourself enough. The words hit me in the gut. For years, I'd internalized every doubt, every snide comment, every eye roll from the suits in the boardroom. I'd let their dismissiveness shape the way I saw myself. But now, with Ethan's words echoing in my head, I realized how much I'd let them define my worth. I pulled out the Aurora Systems contract, spreading it across the table like a battle plan. I'm not going to make the same mistakes they did. I said, if we're going to build this, really build it, we're going to do it right. Every engineer, every designer, every person who touches the code deserves to be part of it. Ethan's eyes lit up. A developer-first model, he breathed. Karen, that could change everything. That's the plan. I said, no more treating us like disposable. No more stealing. We build it together, and no one gets left behind. Rocky barked, tail wagging like he just cast his vote. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The weight of it hit me. I was no longer the outsider clawing for scraps. I was the one holding the pen that would write the next chapter of this industry. And with that realization came a responsibility I'd never considered. Late that night, after Ethan had gone home and Rocky had settled on his bed, I pulled out my old laptop, the same one I'd written the earliest versions of my code on. Its screen was cracked, and the keyboard was missing a few keys. but it felt like an old friend. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Principles for the future. Respect the builders. No software exists without the people who write it. Their voices matter. Transparency is non-negotiable. No more backroom deals. No more shell companies. Every transaction, every partnership, open to scrutiny. Profit shares, not just paychecks. If you build it, you own a piece of it. No exceptions. No one is disposable. We lift each other up. No one gets left behind. Innovation without exploitation. We create because we care, not because someone told us to." I read the list twice, the words burning into my brain. It wasn't just about Apex Core anymore. It was about every coder who'd ever felt used. Every developer who'd ever poured themselves into something only to watch someone else take the credit. My phone buzzed with a new message from Isabella. "Isabella, our board is on board. They're eager to meet you and discuss the first collaborative project. You've got a green light." Karen. My heart leapt into my throat. It was happening. The next morning, I met Isabella and her team at a small co-working space downtown, intentionally low-key. Free of Apex Core's corporate pomp. The energy in the room crackled like electricity. Designers with tattoos and engineers in hoodies. It felt like home. Isabella hugged me like we were old friends. "Karen," she said, eyes bright, "you've lit a fire under this industry. They're all watching you now." I took a deep breath, letting the warmth of her words sink in. "Then let's give them something to see," I said. We spent hours sketching out ideas. A new platform, one that gave creators full control over their work. A community-driven QA process, so bugs wouldn't get buried. Real-time collaboration, where no one got cut out of the credit. Every idea felt like a lifeline to the person I used to be, the girl who'd fought alone. Terrified and exhausted. Now, surrounded by people who believed in the same things I did, I felt stronger than I'd ever imagined. Ethan was there too, sketching out frameworks on a whiteboard. His grin so wide it made me laugh. "You look different, Karen," he said, pausing with the marker in hand. "Different how?" I asked. "Like you finally believe in yourself," he said. For a moment, my throat tightened. He was right. I wasn't that scared coder anymore. I was a leader. I stepped up to the whiteboard, grabbed the marker from Ethan, and began to draw the architecture of our new platform. Rocky's tail thumped against the floor like a drumroll, and I felt the electricity in the room rise. This was it, the future I'd fought for. And it was only the beginning. A week later, I found myself standing on the main stage at TechRise 2025, the biggest conference in the city, spotlights blazing down on me. An ocean of faces staring back. I'd always thought of conference stages as the territory of men in suits. People who smiled for cameras but never for the engineers who built their empires. But today, it was my stage. I looked down at the note cards in my hand, each one scribbled with half-sentences and messy arrows. I didn't need them anymore. I knew my story by heart. I took a breath, feeling the electric hum of the crowd, the beat of my heart sinking with their anticipation. When I started, I began, my voice steady. I was just a kid with a laptop and a dog named Rocky who didn't know the difference between a bug and a breakthrough. I didn't have a fancy degree or a corporate mentor. I had sleepless nights, a cracked keyboard, and a stubborn belief that code could change the world. I paused, scanning the crowd. Engineers, designers, young developers with hoodies zipped up like armor. Eyes wide and hungry. I saw myself in every single one of them. But somewhere along the way, I continued. I learned that code alone doesn't build a future. People do. People like you, sleepless, determined, tired of being overlooked. A murmur ran through the audience. I could feel their energy building. Like we were all on the edge of something. I built software that became the backbone of companies that forgot I existed. I said, they stole it, rebranded it, sold it as their own. And for a while, I thought I'd lost. But here's the thing. They didn't steal my story. They didn't steal the nights I spent staring at a blank screen. They didn't steal the lines of code that came from my hands and my heart. A hush fell. I could see tears in a few eyes. Heads nodding, hands clenched in solidarity. So I took it back. I said, I built something new, something no one can ever take from me. A platform where the creators get to own their work. Where the people who actually build the world's future are the ones who get to decide what that future looks like. A cheer rose, small at first, then louder, like a wave cresting. And you know what? I said, voice rising with every word. This isn't just about me. This is about every one of you who's ever stayed up until 3 a.m. fixing a bug. Every one of you who's ever been told you're replaceable. Every one of you who's ever been laughed at by a boardroom full of suits who couldn't code their way out of a paper bag. The laughter that erupted was sharp, fierce, like the sound of a generation refusing to be silenced. Today, I said, raising my fist, we build something new. We build it together. And every line of code we write, every bug we fix, every idea we share, it's ours. The applause was deafening. It rolled over me like thunder. Like a promise. I felt tears prick my eyes. But I held them back. This wasn't a moment for me to cry. This was a moment to stand tall. I glanced to the side of the stage, where Isabella stood, her arms crossed, a proud smile on her face. Ethan was there too, leaning forward, eyes shining. Even Rocky, his leash held by one of the conference volunteers, was wagging his tail like a metronome of victory. I looked back at the crowd. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, I said honestly. I don't know how many more fights we'll have to win. But I do know this. We're done building other people's dreams. From now on, we build our own. The crowd erupted. The noise, the energy, the sheer force of 1,000 voices raised in unison. It felt like electricity in my veins. After the speech, I stepped down from the stage. Reporters rushed in, but I waved them off. This wasn't their moment. This was ours. Ethan was the first to reach me. He wrapped me in a hug that felt like coming home. You did it, he said into my ear. His voice choked. I pulled back, grinning. No, we did it, I corrected. Isabella joined us, her smile fierce and determined. The board just voted. Aurora Systems is officially partnering with ARX Systems. You're in charge of all the technical architecture. We'll handle the logistics. But this, she gestured around us. This is your revolution. Karen. A laugh burst from my throat. It felt so good to laugh and mean it. Then let's make it count, I said. We spent the rest of the afternoon in a nearby cafe. Laptops open, scribbling on napkins, arguing over frameworks. For the first time in years, every argument felt like progress. Every challenge like an opportunity. At one point, Ethan looked up from his screen and said, Karen, do you realize what you've done? You didn't just win. You changed the rules. I met his gaze, my heart swelling. Good, I said. It's about time. The sun dipped below the city skyline, painting the sky with streaks of gold and pink. I knew there would be more battles, more sleepless nights, more people who would try to tear us down. But now I had an army of builders, dreamers, and rebels. And for the first time, I wasn't alone. As I walked home that night, Rocky trotting beside me, I felt the weight of every line of code I'd ever written. Every rejection I'd ever endured. But I also felt something new, a lightness, a certainty. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of all of ours. And I was ready, standing on that stage, surrounded by applause and an energy that felt unstoppable. I finally understood something I'd spent years overlooking. My worth was never defined by the lines of code I wrote or the patents I filed. It was defined by the strength I showed when the world tried to bury me. By the courage it took to stand up and claim my voice when everyone else wanted me to stay quiet. The lesson was simple. No one else gets to write your story but you. I'd let the suits at Apex Corps convince me that my ideas didn't matter. That my contributions were disposable. But the truth was, they feared what I could build because they knew it would outshine their stolen illusions. That's why they stole from me, because they couldn't build it themselves. Now, I knew that resilience, integrity, and self-belief weren't just slogans. They were survival, and I'd never let anyone take that from me again. Every one of us has felt overshadowed, underestimated, or stolen from at some point in our lives, whether it's at work, in our personal relationships, or even in our own heads. But here's the thing. Your story is yours to tell. No one else gets to decide your value or write your ending. When you stand up for yourself, when you refuse to let others define you, that's when you become unstoppable. Don't wait for permission to fight for what's yours. Build your own platform. Find allies who believe in you. And never forget that your ideas are worth protecting. Because at the end of the day, the only person who can truly silence you is you, and you're not done yet. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.